The Barrett M82 lay across the concrete barrier like a sleeping predator, its matte black finish drinking in the harsh Nevada sun. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his brow as he watched the civilian woman approach the firing line, her worn hiking boots crunching against the desert gravel. Something about her gait, too measured, too aware, made the hair on his arms stand up. "Ma'am, I need to remind you that this is a .50 caliber anti-material rifle," Chen said, his voice carrying the practiced authority of 15 years in the Marine Corps. "It's not like the hunting rifles most civilians are familiar with. The recoil alone can—" "I understand," she interrupted, her voice softer than he expected but carrying an undertone that made him pause. She was perhaps 35, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and hands that showed calluses in all the wrong places for a weekend shooter. Her name tag read E. Sullivan in neat block letters, but everything else about her remained carefully anonymous. The Quantico Advanced Marksmanship course had seen its share of civilian observers, defense contractors, military spouses, even the occasional journalist. But Elena Sullivan had arrived with credentials that raised eyebrows and opened doors without explanation. Her paperwork was pristine, her background check came back clean, and yet Chen couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at someone who belonged behind the rifle rather than observing others use it. "The target is 847 meters downrange," said Corporal James Park, squinting through his spotting scope at the distant steel plate barely visible as a dark speck against the mountain backdrop. "We're shooting across Hell's Canyon today. Winds variable, maybe 8 to 12 knots from the southwest, but it swirls unpredictably through those rock formations." Elena nodded, stepping closer to examine the Barrett without touching it. The weapon was a monument to precision engineering, a semi-automatic rifle capable of reaching out nearly 3 miles with devastating accuracy. Its 10-round magazine was loaded with .50 BMG rounds, each cartridge longer than her hand and carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through engine blocks. "The atmospheric conditions are challenging today," added Lieutenant Sarah Wong, the range safety officer. "We've got a temperature inversion at about 1,500 meters, and the humidity is dropping as the day heats up. Most of our shooters are having trouble compensating." Indeed, the morning had been a series of near misses and frustrated adjustments. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a sniper instructor with 2 combat tours, had taken 4 shots to hit the target. Gunnery Sergeant Thompson, fresh from a deployment in Afghanistan, had managed it on his 3rd attempt but only after extensive wind calculations and scope adjustments. Elena's eyes swept the landscape, taking in details that made Chen increasingly uncomfortable. She noted the distant heat shimmer, the way dust devils formed and dissipated in the valley below, the subtle changes in vegetation that indicated wind patterns. Her breathing was controlled, almost meditative, as if she were already calculating trajectories and atmospheric variables. "The Barrett uses a muzzle brake to reduce felt recoil," Chen continued, falling into his instructor routine despite his growing unease. "But it's still substantial. The rifle weighs 28 pounds unloaded, and the muzzle velocity is approximately 2,800 feet per second with standard M33 ball ammunition." "M33 ball," Elena repeated, her first real engagement with the technical discussion. "What about the M8 API? Or are you restricted to training rounds here?" The question hung in the desert air like a heat mirage. Chen exchanged glances with Park and Wong. Most civilians couldn't identify different ammunition types, let alone ask about armor-piercing incendiary rounds with such casual familiarity. "We're using M33 ball today," Wong replied carefully. "Standard practice for the course." Elena nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable, though Chen caught something in her expression. Disappointment? Relief? He couldn't tell. The range was a testament to military precision and taxpayer funding. Carved from federal land in the Nevada desert, it stretched nearly 4 miles from the firing line to the farthest target positions. Concrete bunkers and steel barriers provided protection from ricochets and wind, while sophisticated electronic systems monitored every shot. The facility cost more than most small towns' annual budgets, but it was essential for training the military's most elite marksmen. Private First Class David Kim emerged from the equipment shed carrying a shooting mat and bipod adjustments. At 19, he was the youngest member of the training cadre and still impressed by every aspect of the long-range shooting program. His enthusiasm was infectious, though it sometimes grated on the more experienced instructors. Ma'am, would you like me to explain the ballistic computer? Kim asked eagerly. It accounts for temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, even the Coriolis effect at extreme ranges. Elena's smile was genuine for the first time that morning. That's very kind of you, Private Kim, but I think I'd rather feel the shot first. Understanding comes through experience, don't you think? Chen felt his chest tighten. Ma'am, I'm not sure you understand. This isn't a weapon you feel your way through. The physics involved are substantial, yes. Elena's voice carried a note of finality that reminded Chen uncomfortably of his own commanding officers. Staff Sergeant, I've traveled a considerable distance to observe your program. I have the proper authorizations. And, unless I'm mistaken, your standard protocol includes allowing qualified observers to attempt a shot under proper supervision. The authorizations were indeed in order, though Chen had made 3 separate calls to verify them. Someone very high up the chain of command wanted Elena Sullivan to have access to this facility, and that someone had made it clear that accommodation should be provided without unnecessary questions. The protocol exists, Wong admitted reluctantly, but it's typically reserved for military personnel from allied nations or senior defense officials. The liability considerations alone are covered by my documentation. Elena finished. She reached into her jacket and produced a slim folder that Chen had reviewed twice that morning. The legal language was impeccable, the signatures authentic, and the insurance coverage astronomical. Someone had invested serious resources in ensuring Elena Sullivan could fire a Barrett M82 at the Quantico Advanced Marksmanship course. Park lowered his spotting scope and turned to face the group. Ma'am, with respect, the longest confirmed sniper kill in combat is just over 500 meters, achieved by a Canadian Special Forces operator with years of training in ideal conditions. This target is nearly 3 miles away. The margin for error is measured in inches, and environmental factors can throw the shot off by yards. I understand the difficulty, Elena said simply. Chen made his decision. The paperwork was legitimate, the authorizations were valid, and his instructions from higher command were clear. Moreover, something about Elena Sullivan's calm confidence suggested she understood exactly what she was asking for. Very well, he said, but we do this by the book. Full safety protocol, proper equipment check, and extensive coaching throughout the process. Elena nodded her agreement as Kim began setting up the shooting position. He unfolded the mat with military precision, adjusted the bipod legs for the Barrett, and checked the rifle's action to ensure smooth operation. The weapon's bolt cycled with mechanical certainty, chambering one of the massive .50 caliber rounds. The scope is a Leupold Mark IV, Wong explained as Elena examined the optics. Variable magnification ranging from 16 to 24 power. At maximum magnification, the target will appear roughly the size of a dinner plate, but you'll lose field of view, and the image will be less stable. Elena peered through the scope without touching the rifle, adjusting her position until she could see the distant target. The steel plate was a dark smudge against the mountain backdrop, barely distinguishable from the surrounding rocks and shadows. Heat waves created a constantly shifting mirage that made precise aiming nearly impossible. The reticle is in milliradians, Park added, taking his position behind the spotting scope. Each mil subtends 3.6 inches at 100 yards, so at our current range, 1 mil of holdover equals approximately 10 feet. The bullet drop alone is over 30 feet, not accounting for wind drift or atmospheric conditions. Chen watched Elena process this information with an intensity that made him increasingly nervous. She wasn't asking questions like a curious observer or taking notes like a contractor evaluating equipment. Instead, she absorbed each detail with the focus of someone preparing for a specific task. The wind is picking up, Kim observed, watching the flag's downrange flutter more vigorously. Probably 12 to 15 knots now, and it's shifting direction every few minutes. Elena stood and walked to the edge of the firing position, her eyes scanning the valley below. She spent several minutes simply watching, observing dust patterns, noting how different sections of vegetation moved in the breeze, studying the heat shimmer that rose from the desert floor. Her concentration was absolute, as if she were reading a language written in wind and light. There's a pattern, she said finally, returning to Barrett. The wind shifts roughly every 4 minutes. cycling through 3 distinct directions. The strongest gusts coincide with the thermal columns rising from that dark rock formation at about 2,000 meters. Chen felt his mouth go dry. Elena had just demonstrated an understanding of environmental conditions that took most snipers months to develop. Her observation about the thermal columns was particularly unsettling. It was the kind of advanced fieldcraft that only came through extensive experience. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "may I ask about your background? Your observations suggest considerable familiarity with long-range shooting conditions." Elena's expression remained neutral, but Chen caught a flicker of something. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. "I've spent time outdoors," she said simply. "Hunting, hiking, that sort of thing." The answer was technically responsive, but revealed nothing meaningful. Chen exchanged another look with Wang, who had clearly reached similar conclusions about their mysterious observer. "The rifle is ready," Kim announced, having completed his equipment check. "The chamber is loaded, safety is engaged, and all systems are nominal." Elena approached Barrett with a reverence that surprised Chen. She didn't immediately grab the weapon or assume a firing position. Instead, she knelt beside it and spent several moments simply looking at the rifle, as if greeting an old friend. "It's beautiful," she said softly, and Chen realized she meant it. Elena Sullivan saw something in the Barrett M82 that went beyond its function as a weapon. She appreciated its engineering, its precision, its deadly elegance. "Ma'am, before we proceed, I need to brief you on the fundamentals," Chen said, launching into the standard instruction sequence. "Sight alignment, breath control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. The Barrett's trigger has a clean break at approximately 4.5 pounds, but the rifle's weight distribution is different from conventional firearms." Elena listened attentively, occasionally nodding or asking brief clarification questions, but Chen noticed she never asked about basics. Her questions focused on advanced topics like barrel harmonics, scope parallax adjustment, and the rifle's point of impact shift as the barrel heated. "The most critical factor at this range is reading the environment," Wang added. "Wind speed and direction change constantly, and you have to account for the bullet's time of flight, nearly 4 seconds from muzzle to target. Conditions can shift significantly during that time." 4.2 seconds, Elena corrected absently, then caught herself. "Approximately, I mean." The precision of her correction made Chen's hands tremble slightly. 4.2 seconds was exactly right, calculated to the 10th of a second for standard M33 ball ammunition at 2,847 meters. It wasn't the kind of information a casual observer would know. Elena settled behind Barrett, her body position revealing training that went far beyond weekend hunting trips. She assumed a textbook-prone position without coaching, her left elbow directly under the rifle, her right shoulder naturally accepting the stock's recoil pad. Her grip on the pistol grip was relaxed but controlled, and she found the trigger's sweet spot immediately. "Breathing control is essential," Chen said, though he could see Elena was already implementing proper technique. Her breathing was deep and regular, each exhalation slightly longer than the inhalation in the classic sniper pattern. Through the spotting scope, Park watched the distant target waver in the heat mirage. "Wind has shifted again," he reported. "Now coming from the east-southeast at about 10 knots. The mirage is running left to right, which indicates a right-to-left wind at the target." Elena made minute adjustments to the Barrett scope, her movements precise and economical. She was calculating something. Chen could see the concentration in her eyes as she processed environmental variables and made mental corrections. "Ma'am, would you like me to talk you through the wind?" Wang offered. "Thank you, but I think I have it," Elena replied, her voice taking on a different quality. Quieter, more focused, as if she were entering a meditative state. Chen watched Elena's breathing slow and deepen. Her body seemed to relax even further, merging with the rifle until they became a single system. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, not yet applying pressure but ready to act when the moment arrived. "Target appears steady," Park reported. "Mirage is consistent. Wind flags are holding." Elena's breathing stopped at natural respiratory pause, the moment between exhalation and inhalation when the body is most stable. Chen held his own breath, suddenly aware that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The Barrett's muzzle blast was enormous, a concussive wave that hammered Chen's chest despite his hearing protection. Dust and debris flew in all directions as the rifle's muzzle brake redirected propellant gases. The sound echoed off the concrete barriers and rolled across the desert like thunder. 4.2 seconds later, Park's voice came through the spotting scope with barely controlled amazement. "Target hit! Center mass! Perfect shot!" Elena remained motionless behind the rifle, her eyes still pressed to the scope as if confirming what her body already knew. When she finally lifted her head, her expression was serene, not surprised, not excited, but satisfied in a way that suggested this outcome had never been in doubt. Chen stared at the woman who had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. A 847-meter shot on the first attempt in challenging conditions with an unfamiliar rifle. The physics alone should have prevented success, and yet Park's spotting scope confirmed what they had all witnessed. "Ma'am," Chen said slowly, "I think we need to talk." But when he turned toward the firing position, Elena Sullivan was already walking away, her business at the Quantico Advanced Marksmanship course apparently complete. She moved with the same measured pace that had marked her arrival, leaving behind only questions and the lingering scent of spent propellant. Park lowered his spotting scope and looked at his colleagues with the expression of someone who had just witnessed a miracle. "In 15 years of spotting, I've never seen anything like that. The ballistic solution was perfect. She didn't adjust windage, didn't correct for elevation, just aimed and fired as if she knew exactly where that bullet would go." Kim was frantically checking his equipment readings, convinced that some measurement error had occurred, but the electronic systems confirmed what their eyes had seen. A single shot, fired at 1,347 hours, impacting the center of a target 847 meters downrange with textbook precision. Wang began collecting Elena's paperwork, though she suspected the documents would reveal nothing more than they had that morning. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to arrange Elena Sullivan's visit, while ensuring that her true identity and background remained hidden. "Staff Sergeant," Wang said quietly, "we need to report this up the chain. Someone just demonstrated capabilities that raise questions about who Elena Sullivan really is." Chen nodded, still staring down the range where Elena had disappeared into the desert heat. The Barrett M82 lay cooling on its bipod, the empty brass case already collected by Kim as evidence of what they had witnessed. As the afternoon sun climbed higher and the desert heat became oppressive, Chen found himself wondering not just who Elena Sullivan was, but why she had chosen to reveal her extraordinary abilities at his range, on this day, with witnesses who would be compelled to report what they had seen. The answer to that question would prove more complex and dangerous than any of them could have imagined. Elena Sullivan had been driving for 6 hours when she finally pulled into the parking lot of the Desert Rose Motel, a faded pink structure that looked like it had been waiting for demolition since the Reagan administration. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting irregular shadows across the cracked asphalt, where tumbleweeds gathered against the building's foundation like supplicants seeking shelter. Room 127 was exactly what she expected: thin walls, thinner towels, and a window air conditioning unit that wheezed arthritically against the Nevada heat. But it was anonymous, paid for in cash, and most importantly, it was temporary. Elena had learned long ago that temporary was the closest thing to safety she could achieve. She sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes to process what had happened at the range. 3 minutes to acknowledge the risk she had taken, the attention she had drawn, and the consequences that would inevitably follow. Then she pushed those thoughts aside and began planning her next moves. The laptop emerged from her duffel bag along with a satellite communication device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a military radio. Elena connected to an encrypted network that existed in the shadows of the internet, where conversations happened in coded bursts and identities were fluid things that could be discarded like empty ammunition casings. "Package delivered," she typed. "Demonstration complete, proceeding to Phase 2. The response came within minutes. "Understood. Maintain operational security. Assets moving to secondary positions." Elena closed the connection and dismantled the communication device with practiced efficiency. The components went into separate bags that would be disposed of at different locations along her route. Operational security wasn't just a precaution in her world. It was the difference between completing a mission and disappearing into a shallow grave in the desert. Her reflection in the motel room's mirror showed a woman who could blend into any crowd. Average height, unremarkable features, the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. It was a carefully cultivated anonymity that had kept her alive for 12 years, ever since the day she walked away from a life that no longer existed. The memories came whether she invited them or not, triggered by the familiar weight of a rifle, the scent of gunpowder, the satisfaction of a perfect shot. She had been someone else then. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, United States Army, Special Operations Forces. A woman with a future, a career, and the naive belief that serving her country meant something more than following orders without questions. Afghanistan had taught her otherwise. The village of Khost had been a routine reconnaissance mission that turned into a nightmare of moral compromise and political expediency. Elena and her team had been ordered to eliminate a high-value target, a Taliban commander whose intelligence network was feeding information to insurgent groups throughout the region. The shot had been routine, 850 meters, minimal wind, perfect visibility. What hadn't been routine was discovering that their high-value target was actually a schoolteacher who had been feeding information to American forces, not insurgents. Someone in the intelligence chain had deliberately provided false targeting data, turning Elena into an unwitting assassin in a larger game she didn't understand. The cover-up had been swift and thorough. The schoolteacher became a Taliban commander in official reports. Elena's team was sworn to secrecy and transferred to different units. The truth was buried under layers of classification and national security protocols that made questioning the official narrative tantamount to treason. Elena had tried to work within the system at first. She filed reports, requested investigations, and demanded answers from her chain of command. Each attempt was met with increasingly stern warnings about the consequences of pursuing unauthorized inquiries into classified operations. When she persisted, the warnings became threats, and when she continued to push, the threats became actions. The car accident that killed her parents had been professionally executed, a mechanical failure that caused brake failure on a mountain road, resulting in a tragic single-vehicle collision. The timing, just 3 days after Elena had contacted a congressional oversight committee, was either remarkably coincidental or precisely calculated. Elena knew which explanation was correct. She had attended her parents' funeral in full-dress uniform, accepted the folded flag with appropriate solemnity, and listened to the honor guard's rifle salute with the knowledge that the system she served had murdered the 2 people she loved most in the world. That night, Lieutenant Elena Vasquez ceased to exist, replaced by a woman with no past, no connections, and nothing left to lose. The transformation hadn't been easy. Elena had spent 6 months learning to live without an identity, moving from city to city, job to job, always staying ahead of the surveillance networks that tracked American citizens with algorithmic precision. She discovered that disappearing in the digital age required more than changing names. It required becoming invisible to the vast electronic systems that defined modern existence. Her skills, however, remained valuable. The same abilities that had made her an exceptional military sniper translated seamlessly to the shadow world of private contractors, corporate security, and the gray areas where government policy intersected with plausible deniability. Elena became Elena Sullivan, freelance security consultant, a woman whose references couldn't be verified but whose capabilities spoke for themselves. The work had started small, protecting executives during business trips to unstable regions, providing security assessments for companies operating in hostile environments, occasionally serving as a deterrent when negotiations required a subtle reminder of the consequences of bad faith. But gradually, the assignments became more complex, more morally ambiguous, and more dangerous. Elena never killed anyone who didn't deserve it, by her standards. But her standards had evolved considerably from those of Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, who had believed in clear distinctions between right and wrong, friend and enemy, legal and illegal. Elena Sullivan operated in a world where such distinctions were luxuries that got people killed. The Desert Rose Motel's walls were thin enough that she could hear the television in the adjacent room, a news broadcast discussing regional tensions and international sanctions. Elena listened with professional interest, recognizing the coded language that indicated significant developments in several ongoing conflicts. Her phone would start ringing soon with offers of work, requests for her specialized services in places where American foreign policy was implemented through means that couldn't be officially acknowledged. But first, she had to complete her current assignment. Elena opened her laptop again and accessed a different network, this one protected by encryption protocols that would take government supercomputers months to crack. The files she needed were buried in a maze of proxy servers and dead drops, accessible only through a sequence of authentication codes that changed every 12 hours. The target profile appeared on her screen: Marcus Volkov, former Russian intelligence officer turned arms dealer, currently residing in a fortified compound outside Las Vegas. Volkov had been selling advanced weapons systems to terrorist organizations, providing the technology needed to carry out attacks against American interests worldwide. 3 previous attempts to eliminate him had failed, costing the lives of 6 operatives and compromising 2 separate intelligence networks. Elena studied the surveillance photographs and architectural drawings with the methodical patience of a hunter examining prey. Volkov's compound was a masterpiece of paranoid engineering: reinforced concrete walls, electronic surveillance systems, overlapping fields of fire, and multiple escape routes. The man lived like a medieval lord, surrounded by loyal guards and sophisticated defenses that made conventional assault virtually impossible. But conventional assault wasn't Elena's specialty. The compound had one vulnerability that previous assassination attempts had overlooked: Volkov's ego. Despite his paranoia, he couldn't resist making a show of his wealth and power. Every Tuesday evening he held court on the compound's elevated terrace, entertaining guests and conducting business while displaying his apparent invulnerability to his enemies. The terrace was 200 meters from the nearest elevation that offered a suitable firing position, a distance that exceeded the capabilities of most sniper rifles and all but the most skilled marksmen. Volkov had calculated that this range provided absolute security against conventional threats. Volkov had never encountered Elena Sullivan. She closed the laptop and began preparing her equipment. The Barrett M82 demonstration at Quantico had served multiple purposes: confirming her capabilities to the client, testing her skills at extreme range, and establishing her presence in the area without arousing suspicion. The range staff would report the unusual shot to their superiors, who would launch an investigation that would ultimately conclude that Elena Sullivan was an exceptionally gifted civilian marksman with mysterious but apparently legitimate credentials. By the time they realized their mistake, Elena would be gone, leaving behind only another impossible shot and another untraceable kill. The rifle case was hidden in a storage facility across town, its contents disguised as survey equipment to discourage casual inspection. Elena had spent weeks preparing the weapon system, modifying the Barrett stock for optimal fit, adjusting the trigger to her preferences, and zeroing the scope under conditions that matched her intended shooting environment. Every component had been tested and retested until the rifle became an extension of her will, a precision instrument capable of delivering death at distances that defied conventional understanding. The ammunition was hand-loaded to exacting specifications, each cartridge crafted to achieve perfect consistency in velocity, trajectory, and terminal performance. Elena's preparation rituals were as meticulous as her equipment. She spent an hour in meditation, clearing her mind of distractions and centering her consciousness on the task ahead. Physical preparation followed: stretching exercises to maintain flexibility, breathing techniques to control her heart rate, and visualization exercises that allowed her to rehearse every aspect of the upcoming shot. The woman who emerged from these preparations was different from the one who had entered the motel room. Elena Sullivan, the security consultant, had been replaced by something more primal and focused, a weapon system optimized for a single purpose. She checked her watch: 1,730 hours. The sun would set in approximately 90 minutes, providing the twilight conditions that offered optimal visibility while minimizing her exposure to counter-surveillance. Volkov's security team was professional but predictable, following protocols that Elena had studied extensively during her reconnaissance phase. The drive to her prepared firing position took 45 minutes through increasingly desolate terrain. Elena's vehicle was another carefully selected component of her operational plan, a battered pickup truck that looked like it belonged to a rancher or construction worker, unremarkable and forgettable in the vast Nevada landscape. The firing position itself was a work of art, carved from the desert hillside with the patience of a sculptor and the precision of an engineer. Elena had spent 3 nights preparing the site, removing rocks, leveling the ground, and creating concealed positions for both herself and her equipment. Natural vegetation provided camouflage, while carefully positioned As she settled into position and began assembling Barrett, Elena allowed herself a moment of professional satisfaction. The shot she was about to attempt was not just a demonstration of skill. It was a work of art that would be studied and discussed by ballistics experts for years to come. The rifle came together with mechanical precision, each component sliding into place with the certainty of inevitability. Elena loaded a single round into the chamber and began her final preparations, adjusting the scope's focus, checking wind conditions, and calculating the atmospheric variables that would influence her bullet's 3-mile journey to its target. Through the high-powered optics, Volkov's compound appeared as a miniature world of light and shadow. Elena could see guards patrolling the perimeter, their movements following predictable patterns that she had memorized during weeks of observation. Security cameras swept designated sectors with robotic regularity, their blind spots carefully mapped and catalogued. At precisely 2000 hours, Marcus Volkov emerged onto his terrace, a glass of vodka in one hand and a satellite phone in the other. He was conducting business, Elena realized, probably arranging another arms sale that would put advanced weapons into the hands of people who would use them against innocent civilians. Elena's breathing slowed as she entered the meditative state that preceded her most difficult shots. The world narrowed to a tunnel of focus that extended from her eye through the scope to the distant figure on the terrace. Environmental conditions, ballistic calculations, and mechanical considerations merged into a single unified understanding that existed beyond conscious thought. The crosshairs settled on Marcus Volkov's center mass as Elena's finger found the trigger's sweet spot. Time seemed to compress and expand simultaneously, each heartbeat stretching into eternity, while the entire universe contracted to the space between her rifle and its target. But something was wrong. Through the scope, Elena saw movement that didn't match her intelligence reports. Additional figures were present on the terrace, small shapes that her initial surveillance had missed. Children. Volkov had brought his grandchildren to visit. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. The intelligence briefing had indicated that Volkov lived alone except for his security team. There had been no mention of family members, no indication that innocent civilians might be present during the planned elimination. Elena's finger tensed on the trigger as she fought against 12 years of training and instinct. The shot was perfect. Wind conditions ideal, atmospheric variables calculated to the decimal point, target acquisition complete. One squeeze of the trigger would eliminate a man responsible for supplying weapons to terrorists worldwide. But it would also traumatize 2 children who would witness their grandfather's violent death. The ethical calculus that had guided Elena's career suddenly became impossibly complex. Volkov was undoubtedly a legitimate target whose elimination would save innocent lives by disrupting weapons sales to terrorist organizations. But the psychological damage to 2 children would be immediate and permanent, creating new victims in the name of preventing future casualties. Elena's breathing remained controlled as she wrestled with a decision that had to be made in seconds. Through the scope, she could see Volkov laughing at something one of the children had said. His face transformed from the cold mask of a professional killer into something almost human. The moments stretched beyond endurance until Elena made her choice. Her finger eased off the trigger as she settled in to wait. Volkov would conduct his business, spend time with his grandchildren, and eventually return to his private quarters. Elena would wait for a cleaner opportunity, even if it meant compromising her carefully planned operation. But as she watched through the scope, Elena realized that Marcus Volkov had just provided her with something far more valuable than a perfect shot. He had reminded her that even in her carefully controlled world of moral ambiguity and necessary violence, there were still lines that shouldn't be crossed. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez would have understood that distinction. Perhaps some part of her still existed after all. 3 days passed before Volkov presented another opportunity, and Elena used every minute to refine her understanding of the target and his environment. She rented a small apartment in Henderson under another identity, establishing a base of operations that allowed her to maintain surveillance, while appearing to be just another transient resident in Nevada's sprawling urban maze. The children's presence had changed everything. Elena's initial intelligence had been fundamentally flawed, suggesting either deliberate misdirection or a catastrophic failure in operational planning. She began investigating the source of her information, following digital breadcrumbs through encrypted communication channels and coded financial transactions that revealed a disturbing pattern. Her employer wasn't who they claimed to be. The realization came gradually, assembled from fragments of inconsistent data and unexplained coincidences. The payment structure was wrong, too complex for a standard elimination contract, routed through financial instruments that suggested government involvement. The intelligence briefings contained information that was simultaneously too detailed and too incomplete, as if edited by someone with access to classified databases but specific motives for concealing certain facts. Most damning was the timing. Elena had been hired exactly 72 hours after Marcus Volkov had approached the FBI with an offer to provide information about his former clients in exchange for protection and relocation. The arms dealer had apparently decided that retirement was preferable to spending his remaining years dodging assassination attempts. Someone wanted Volkov dead before he could testify. Elena's investigation revealed a web of corruption that extended far beyond a simple contract killing. Volkov's weapons sales had been facilitated by officials within the American defense establishment who had provided classified technology specifications and export licenses in exchange for substantial financial compensation. His elimination would protect not just terrorist organizations but high-ranking government officials whose careers depended on maintaining the fiction that American weapons technology wasn't being sold to the nation's enemies. The deeper Elena dug, the more familiar the pattern became. She had seen this before, in Afghanistan, where inconvenient truths were buried along with the people who threatened to expose them. The same system that had murdered her parents was now using her as an instrument to protect its secrets. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Situation deteriorating. Timeline accelerated. Target must be eliminated within 48 hours. Bonus authorized for immediate completion. She stared at the message until the self-destruct protocol erased it from the device's memory. Someone was getting nervous, pushing for quick resolution of a problem that was growing more complicated by the hour. The bonus offer was substantial, enough money to fund several years of comfortable anonymity in a country without extradition treaties. But Elena had learned that blood money always carried a price that went beyond financial considerations. She began planning her extraction instead of her attack. Elena's preparations were methodical and comprehensive, designed to anticipate every possible complication in what would essentially be a declaration of war against the organization that employed her. She opened new accounts in offshore banks, established alternative identities in 3 different countries, and arranged transportation assets that would allow her to disappear within hours of making her decision final. The Barrett M82 was returned to its storage facility, carefully cleaned and wrapped in materials that would prevent any trace evidence from being recovered. Elena's other weapons received similar treatment, each one methodically prepared for disposal or emergency use. She had learned long ago that survival often depended on eliminating anything that could connect her to past operations. But before she could disappear, Elena needed to understand exactly who was hunting Volkov and why. The arms dealer's FBI contact was a special agent named Sarah Chen, no relation to the Marine instructor from Quantico, despite the shared surname, who specialized in counterintelligence operations involving foreign weapons trafficking. Elena had met Agent Chen twice during her reconnaissance, observing the federal officers' meetings with Volkov from concealed positions that revealed the careful security protocols surrounding their collaboration. Chen was professional, cautious, and apparently unaware that her star witness was being targeted for elimination by the same government she served. The decision to make contact was dangerous but necessary. Elena needed intelligence that only Chen could provide, and the federal agent needed to understand that her witness protection program had been compromised from within. Their interests were temporarily aligned, even if their methods differed substantially. Elena's approach was characteristically indirect. She arranged to be in the right place at the right time when Agent Chen stopped for coffee during her lunch break, creating what appeared to be a chance encounter between 2 professional women, sharing a brief conversation about nothing in particular. "Agent Chen," Elena said quietly, settling into the adjacent seat without invitation, "we need to talk about Marcus Volkov." Chen's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon, though she didn't draw it in the crowded cafe. Her training was evident in the way she assessed threats while maintaining the appearance of casual conversation. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "Not yet. But we have a mutual interest in keeping certain people alive." Elena placed a business card on the table between them. Not her real one, but a carefully crafted identity that would withstand casual investigation. "Security consultant. I've been hired to kill your witness, and I thought you should know that your protection detail has been compromised." Chen's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips, her expression carefully neutral despite the bombshell Elena had just delivered. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have evidence to support such a claim?" "I have a contract," Elena replied simply. "And I have intelligence indicating that Volkov's cooperation with the FBI has created significant problems for people with the resources to solve those problems permanently." The federal agent's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications. Chen had spent 15 years in law enforcement, working her way up through increasingly complex cases that had taught her to recognize truth even when it came from unexpected sources. Something about Elena Sullivan's calm demeanor and precise language suggested she was exactly what she claimed to be. "Assuming for a moment that I believe you," Chen said carefully, "what exactly are you proposing?" Elena leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to ensure their conversation remained private. "Volkov has information that certain people don't want to become public. Those people have hired me to eliminate him before he can testify. I'm declining the contract, but they'll simply find someone else, probably someone less skilled and more willing to accept collateral damage." The reference to collateral damage struck Chen with particular force. She had seen Volkov's grandchildren during their last meeting, two bright kids who had been drawing pictures while their grandfather provided detailed information about international weapons trafficking networks. The thought of those children being harmed in an assassination attempt made her stomach clench with professional rage. "What do you want from me?" Chen asked. "Information. I need to know who's really behind this contract, and I need to understand what Volkov knows that's worth killing to suppress." Elena paused, studying the federal agent's expression. "In exchange, I can provide details about the planned assassination attempt and help you develop countermeasures that might actually work." Chen made her decision with the instinctive certainty that had served her throughout her career. Elena Sullivan was dangerous, probably criminal, and definitely operating outside legal boundaries. But she was also offering intelligence that could save lives and expose corruption within the system Chen had sworn to protect. "There's a park on the east side of town," Chen said, "Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve. Meet me there at sunset. Come alone and bring whatever evidence you have." Elena nodded and stood to leave, but Chen's voice stopped her at the cafe entrance. "Miss Sullivan? If this is some kind of elaborate setup, you should know that I don't die easily." Elena's smile was genuinely warm for the first time in days. "Agent Chen, if I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The bird viewing preserve was deserted at sunset, its trails empty except for the occasional jogger and the wildlife that gave the facility its name. Elena arrived early and established overwatch positions that would allow her to detect any surveillance or potential ambush. Chen's reputation suggested she was trustworthy, but Elena had survived 12 years in the shadow world by trusting no one completely. Agent Chen arrived precisely on time, her appearance suggesting she had taken Elena's warning seriously. The federal agent wore body armor under her jacket and carried additional weapons beyond her standard sidearm. More importantly, she moved with the heightened awareness of someone who understood that routine had become dangerous. "You came alone," Elena observed, emerging from concealment near the preserve's observation blind. "So did you, apparently." Chen's eyes swept the surrounding area, cataloging potential threats and escape routes with professional thoroughness. "Though I suspect you have contingency plans if this goes badly." Elena acknowledged the accuracy of Chen's assessment with a slight nod. She had indeed established multiple fallback positions and extraction routes, along with automated systems that would trigger if she failed to check in at regular intervals. Paranoia was a survival trait in her profession. "Tell me about Marcus Volkov," Elena said, settling onto a park bench that offered clear sightlines in multiple directions. Chen joined her, maintaining enough distance to react if Elena proved hostile while staying close enough for confidential conversation. "Volkov approached us 6 months ago through intermediaries. Former GRU officer, served in Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation, later transitioned to private arms dealing after the Cold War ended. He's been selling advanced weapon systems to terrorist organizations for the past 15 years. What changed his mind about cooperation? Age, mostly. He's 73 years old, has grandchildren he wants to see grow up, and he's tired of looking over his shoulder every day." Chen paused, watching a great blue heron stockfish in the preserve's main pond. Also, his former associates had been eliminating potential witnesses. Volkov realized he was next on the list and decided that federal protection was preferable to a shallow grave. Elena absorbed this information while considering its implications. Volkov's cooperation represented a significant intelligence windfall for American counterterrorism efforts, potentially exposing networks that had been supplying advanced weapons to hostile organizations worldwide. But it also threatened individuals who had facilitated those sales from within the American government. "What can he give you?" Elena asked. "Names, locations, financial records, communication intercepts, everything needed to dismantle several major trafficking networks." Chen's voice carried the satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered dangerous prey. But more importantly, he can identify the American officials who provided classified technical specifications and export authorizations. The scope of the corruption was breathtaking. Elena realized she was looking at a conspiracy that extended from defense contractors to Pentagon officials, potentially involving hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal weapons sales. The people behind her contract weren't just protecting a single operation. They were safeguarding an entire system of institutionalized treason. "Who else knows about Volkov's cooperation?" Elena asked. "Officially? My immediate supervisor, the assistant director for counterintelligence, and the deputy attorney general." Chen's expression darkened as she considered the implications of Elena's question. But information has a way of spreading, especially when it threatens powerful people. Elena opened her laptop and began showing Chen the evidence she had compiled during her investigation. Financial records traced through multiple layers of shell companies, communication intercepts that revealed coded conversations about problem resolution, and most damning, travel records that placed known assets in Las Vegas during the weeks preceding Elena's contract offer. "Someone with access to classified information has been feeding intelligence to your target's enemies," Elena explained, highlighting specific data points that supported her conclusions. "The same people who hired me have been monitoring Volkov's movements, tracking his meetings with you, and planning his elimination with information that could only come from inside the FBI." Chen studied the evidence with growing alarm. The pattern Elena had uncovered suggested not just corruption, but active collaboration between American officials and the criminal networks they were supposed to be investigating. The implications went far beyond a single witness protection case. "If you're right," Chen said slowly, "then Volkov isn't safe anywhere within the federal system. Every safe house, every protection detail, every transportation plan, all of it could be compromised." "It gets worse," Elena continued, accessing another set of files that detailed the broader conspiracy. Volkov's testimony would expose weapons sales that were specifically authorized by officials who are still in positions of power. We're not talking about rogue agents or isolated corruption. This appears to be systematic policy implemented through unofficial channels. The federal agent's professional composure cracked slightly as she realized the magnitude of what Elena was describing. Chen had spent her career believing that law enforcement existed to protect American interests, even when individual officers made mistakes or succumbed to corruption. The possibility that the system itself had been weaponized against its own citizens challenged everything she had dedicated her life to defending. "What do you propose we do about it?" Chen asked. Elena closed her laptop and faced the federal agent directly. "We keep Volkov alive long enough to testify, and we make sure his testimony reaches people who aren't part of the conspiracy. But that means operating outside official channels and accepting that we're essentially at war with elements of our own government." Chen considered the proposal while watching the preserve's wildlife settle into evening routines. Ducks paddled across the pond's surface while herons waited motionlessly for unwary fish. The natural world operated according to simple rules. Predators hunted prey, the strong survived, and death was always one mistake away. "There's something else you should know," Chen said finally. Volkov's debriefing revealed that his weapons sales included advanced sniper systems, rifles and optics that were specifically designed for extreme long-range precision shooting. Some of those systems have been used against American personnel overseas. Elena felt her blood chill as the implications registered. The Barrett M82 demonstration at Quantico suddenly took on new significance. She had unknowingly displayed exactly the capabilities that Volkov's weapons sales had provided to America's enemies. Her contract wasn't just about silencing a witness. It was about eliminating someone who could expose how American soldiers had been killed with American weapons sold through illegal channels. The people who hired you aren't just protecting financial interests, Chen continued. They're covering up treason that has cost American lives. If Volkov testifies, several high-ranking officials will face charges that could result in execution for providing aid and comfort to enemies during wartime. The park grew quiet as sunset approached, the preserve's daytime visitors replaced by nocturnal creatures that moved through shadows with predatory purpose. Elena recognized the metaphor. She and Chen were entering a world where normal rules no longer applied, where survival depended on outmaneuvering enemies who controlled vast resources and operated without legal constraints. I need 48 hours to arrange alternative protection for Volkov, Elena said. Can you keep him safe that long without alerting your superiors? Chen nodded grimly. I have a private facility that isn't in any official database. Former safe house. That was decommissioned after a budget cut, but the security systems are still functional. Volkov and his grandchildren can stay there while we figure out our next moves. Elena stood and began gathering her equipment, already mentally cataloging the preparations needed for what would essentially be a private war against elements of the American intelligence community. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same skills that had made her valuable as an assassin would now be used to protect the lives of innocent people. Agent Chen, Elena said as they prepared to part ways, you should understand that once we do this, there's no going back. The people we're fighting don't accept retirement or resignation. This ends when they're dead, or we are. Chen's smile was grim but determined. Miss Sullivan, I became a federal agent because I believed in protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. If that means fighting enemies within my own government, then that's what I'll do. As Elena drove away from the preserve, she reflected on the strange turn her career had taken. For 12 years, she had operated in the moral gray areas where violence served political purposes, and individual lives were sacrificed for larger strategic objectives. Now she found herself preparing to risk everything to protect a former enemy and his family from the same system that had once commanded her loyalty. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez would have understood the choice. Perhaps that was the most important realization of all. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message that contained only a photograph and a timestamp. The image showed Agent Sarah Chen's body lying in her apartment, apparently the victim of a burglary gone wrong. The timestamp indicated she had been killed less than 6 hours after their meeting at the preserve. Elena stared at the photograph until the device's security protocols erased it from memory. Someone had been watching their meeting, had identified Chen as a threat, and had eliminated her with the casual efficiency of a professional operation. The federal agent's death was both a message and a declaration. Elena's employers were done with subtle approaches and indirect pressure. The war had begun. Elena's first instinct was to run. She had extraction plans prepared for exactly this scenario. Resources cached in multiple locations that would allow her to disappear within hours. A new identity waited in Singapore, complete with financial instruments and documentation that would support a comfortable retirement far from American jurisdiction. But running would mean abandoning Marcus Volkov and his grandchildren to certain death. The arms dealer's cooperation with the FBI had made him a target, and Elena's refusal to complete her contract had simply delayed the inevitable. Other assets would be deployed, and they wouldn't share her scruples about collateral damage. Elena made her decision with the same cold certainty that had guided her most difficult shots. She would fight. The preparations were extensive and methodical, drawing on every skill she had developed during 12 years of covert operations. Elena established multiple base areas around Las Vegas, each one equipped with weapons, communications gear, and supplies needed for extended operations. She arranged for backup identities and extraction routes, while simultaneously preparing offensive capabilities that would allow her to take the fight to her enemies. Most importantly, she began hunting the people who had hired her. The investigation required patience and considerable technical skill, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of encryption and misdirection that had been designed to prevent exactly the kind of analysis Elena was conducting. But her opponents had made a crucial mistake. They had used the same operational security protocols for multiple contracts, creating patterns that could be identified and exploited. Elena discovered that her contract was part of a larger operation targeting several individuals who posed threats to what appeared to be a systematic program of weapons trafficking and technology transfer. Agent Chen had been eliminated because her investigation was approaching dangerous territory. A defense contractor in Virginia had died in a suspicious accident after questioning irregularities in export authorizations. A journalist in Washington had been killed in an apparent robbery after publishing articles about unexplained weapons acquisitions by terrorist organizations. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Someone was conducting a comprehensive cleanup operation designed to eliminate anyone who might expose the scope of American weapons sales to hostile organizations. Elena's contract on Volkov was just one component of a much larger conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and defense industry. As Elena compiled her evidence, she realized that she was looking at something far more dangerous than simple corruption or criminal conspiracy. The weapons sales weren't random acts of greed. They were part of a deliberate strategy to arm America's enemies while simultaneously profiting from the resulting conflicts. Someone was playing both sides of the war on terror, selling weapons to terrorists while also providing the military equipment needed to fight them. The implications were staggering. If Elena's analysis was correct, then American foreign policy had been systematically compromised by individuals who viewed international conflicts as business opportunities, rather than threats to national security. The same people who publicly advocated for strong counterterrorism measures were privately ensuring that terrorist organizations had access to the weapons needed to justify continued military spending. Elena's secure phone buzzed with another encrypted message. Chen's replacement has been assigned. Volkov timeline now 24 hours. Contract bonus doubled for immediate completion. This is final offer. She deleted the message and began preparing for immediate action. Someone was escalating the situation, pushing for rapid resolution of what had become an increasingly complex problem. Elena's refusal to complete the original contract had apparently created enough concern to justify bringing additional resources to bear. That evening, Elena made her way to the decommissioned safe house where Agent Chen had planned to hide Volkov and his grandchildren. The facility was located in an industrial area outside Henderson, disguised as a storage facility, but equipped with sophisticated security systems and defensive positions. Chen had chosen well. The location was isolated enough to prevent civilian casualties while providing multiple escape routes if the position became compromised. Elena arrived to find the safe house already under surveillance. 3 vehicles were positioned at strategic locations around the facility, their occupants maintaining watch while appearing to conduct legitimate business. Elena recognized the pattern: professional operators establishing overwatch positions before launching an assault. Volkov's location had been compromised, probably through the same intelligence sources that had led to Agent Chen's elimination. Elena settled into her own observation position and began cataloging the threats. 8 personnel visible, probably twice that number in reserve positions. Military-grade communications equipment, high-end optics, and weapons that suggested government or military backgrounds. These weren't typical contract killers. They were elite operators with resources that matched their skills. As Elena watched, she realized that the surveillance team wasn't preparing an immediate assault. They were waiting for something, probably additional assets or specific timing that would maximize their operational effectiveness. The delay provided Elena with an opportunity, but also revealed the scope of the resources arrayed against her. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Elena answered cautiously, expecting another contract modification or threat from her employers. Instead, she heard Marcus Volkov's voice, speaking in accented English that carried the weight of fear and desperation. "Ms. Sullivan, Agent Chen gave me your number before she was killed. We need help. There are men outside, and I think they mean to harm my grandchildren." Elena closed her eyes and made the decision that would define the rest of her life. "Mr. Volkov, stay away from the windows and keep the children in the center of the building. I'm coming to get you out." The battle for Marcus Volkov's life was about to begin. Elena's approach to the safe house required every skill she had developed during 12 years of covert operations. The surveillance team was professional and well-equipped, but they had made the classic mistake of assuming their target would remain stationary while they prepared their assault. Elena had learned long ago that the best defense was often an aggressive offense that disrupted enemy planning before they could achieve tactical superiority. She moved through the industrial district's maze of warehouses and storage facilities like a ghost, using shadows and background noise to mask her approach. Elena's equipment was minimal but perfectly suited to her needs. Suppressed pistol, tactical knife, communications gear, and a small selection of tools that could serve as weapons or entry devices depending on circumstances. The first surveillance position was a panel van parked beside a defunct auto repair shop, its occupants maintaining watch on the safe house's primary entrance through one-way glass installed in the vehicle's rear windows. Elena observed the operation for several minutes, noting communication patterns and shift changes that revealed operational procedures. Two operators in the van, both carrying military-grade rifles and wearing body armor that suggested government or contractor backgrounds. Their discipline was excellent. No unnecessary movement, no casual conversation, no behavior that might compromise their position. These were professionals who understood that successful surveillance required patience and absolute attention to detail. Elena's attack was swift and silent. She approached from the vehicle's blind spot, using a lock-picking gun to gain entry through the rear doors while the occupants focused on their observation duties. The suppressed pistol eliminated both operators before either could transmit a warning or reach for their weapons. Elena quickly searched the van's interior, discovering communication equipment that confirmed her worst fears. The surveillance team was coordinating with additional assets positioned throughout the city, part of a comprehensive operation designed to eliminate not just Volkov, but anyone who might interfere with his assassination. Elena's name appeared in several intercepted messages, along with detailed biographical information that could only have come from classified intelligence databases. She disabled the van's communication systems and appropriated several useful items: night vision goggles, additional ammunition, and most importantly, a tablet computer that contained operational plans for the assault on the safe house. Elena's blood chilled as she reviewed the documents, which called for elimination of all personnel found at the location with maximum prejudice and minimal witnesses. The operation had been authorized at levels that made Elena's former contracts look like minor infractions. Someone with access to significant government resources had decided that Volkov's testimony posed an unacceptable threat to national security, despite the fact that his information would ostensibly help protect American interests. Elena moved to the second surveillance position, a modified delivery truck positioned to monitor the safe house's rear exit. The approach was more challenging because the operators had established interlocking fields of observation that would detect conventional infiltration attempts. Elena adapted by using the industrial district's infrastructure to her advantage, moving through drainage culverts and utility corridors that allowed her to emerge inside the surveillance perimeter. The truck contained 3 operators and more sophisticated equipment, including electronic warfare systems designed to jam communications and prevent calls for help. Elena's assault was necessarily more complex, requiring her to neutralize multiple targets while preventing any of them from triggering alarms or calling for support. The attack began with an explosive device improvised from materials found in the industrial area, chemicals from a nearby maintenance facility combined with timer components from a discarded appliance. The explosion wasn't large enough to cause significant structural damage, but it created enough confusion and distraction for Elena to gain entry to the truck through its now unguarded rear entrance. Close-quarters combat in the confined space was brutal and decisive. Elena's knife work was precise and efficient, eliminating all 3 operators before any could reach their weapons or communication devices. She paused briefly to ensure that no signals had been transmitted, then began examining the truck's electronic systems. The jamming equipment revealed the true scope of the operation. Elena discovered that communications throughout the surrounding area were being suppressed, preventing anyone from calling for police assistance or emergency services. The safe house had been effectively isolated, creating a kill zone where Volkov and his grandchildren could be eliminated without interference from local authorities. Elena disabled the jamming systems and appropriated additional equipment, including body armor that would provide protection during her infiltration of the safe house. The tablet computers in the truck contained updated intelligence that painted an even more disturbing picture of the conspiracy she was fighting. The operation against Volkov was being coordinated by a joint task force that included elements from multiple intelligence agencies, suggesting that the weapons trafficking investigation had threatened interests across the entire national security establishment. Elena recognized several names from the personnel listings, individuals she had worked with during her military service, people she had once trusted with her life. The third surveillance position was the most heavily defended, a fortified observation post established in an abandoned warehouse that provided overwatch for the entire area. Elena could see at least 4 operators through her binoculars, along with heavy weapons and communication equipment that suggested this was the command element for the entire operation. Elena's infiltration required patience and careful timing. She waited for shift changes and movement patterns that would create opportunities for undetected entry, while simultaneously preparing backup plans in case her approach was discovered. The warehouse was a maze of industrial equipment and storage areas that provided both concealment and potential ambush sites. Her entry point was a skylight that had been left partially open for ventilation, allowing Elena to rappel into the building's interior using climbing gear improvised from materials found in the surrounding area. The descent required absolute silence and perfect timing to avoid detection by the operators below. Elena landed in a section of the warehouse filled with abandoned machinery, using the industrial equipment as cover while she observed the enemy positions. The command post was more sophisticated than she had expected, with satellite communication systems and electronic surveillance equipment that provided real-time intelligence on law enforcement activities throughout the region. The assault on the command post was Elena's most challenging engagement of the evening. 4 highly trained operators in defensive positions, multiple weapons systems and communications equipment that would summon reinforcements if the position was compromised. Elena's approach required tactical precision that drew on every lesson she had learned during her military service. She began with psychological warfare, using the warehouse's acoustic properties to create sounds that suggested multiple attackers approaching from different directions. The operators responded predictably, dividing their attention and repositioning to address perceived threats that existed only in Elena's carefully orchestrated deception. Elena's attack utilized the confusion to eliminate 2 operators with suppressed gunfire before either could identify her actual position. The remaining personnel attempted to coordinate a defensive response, but Elena had already moved to a new position that allowed her to engage them from an unexpected angle. The final 2 operators were eliminated in close combat that showcased Elena's exceptional training and experience. Her knife work was clinical and efficient, ending the engagement before any warnings could be transmitted to higher command levels. Elena spent 20 minutes examining the command post's equipment and intelligence files, discovering information that confirmed her worst suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy she was fighting. The operation against Volkov was just one component of a comprehensive program designed to eliminate anyone who threatened what appeared to be systematic collaboration between American officials and international arms dealers. The weapons trafficking networks weren't just selling American technology to hostile organizations. They were doing so with the knowledge and approval of individuals within the defense establishment who viewed such sales as necessary components of larger strategic objectives. The profits from illegal arms sales were being used to fund covert operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged or supported through normal budget processes. Elena realized she was looking at a shadow government that operated parallel to official policy structures, making decisions about war and peace based on financial rather than national security considerations. The people she was fighting weren't just criminals, they were traitors who had weaponized the American defense establishment for personal profit. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Marcus Volkov, his voice tight with fear and desperation. "Miss Sullivan, there are more vehicles arriving. I can see armed men taking positions around the building. My grandchildren are frightened, and I don't know how long we can wait." Elena checked her watch and realized that she had been fighting for over 2 hours, giving the enemy time to bring additional resources to bear. The surveillance positions she had eliminated were probably just the outer perimeter of a much larger operation that would adapt to her interference by escalating their response. "Mr. Volkov, I need you to gather the children and move to the building's center room, the one with the reinforced walls that Agent Chen showed you. I'm coming in through the rear entrance in approximately 10 minutes. When you hear 3 short knocks followed by 2 long ones, that's me. Don't open the door for anyone else." Elena began moving toward the safe house, using the industrial district's shadows and concealment to approach the building without detection. Her ammunition was running low, and her body was beginning to show the strain of extended combat operations. But Volkov and his grandchildren were depending on her, and Elena had made a promise that she intended to keep, regardless of personal cost. The safe house appeared quiet from the outside, but Elena's trained eye detected subtle signs of hostile presence. Disturbed dust patterns near windows, security cameras that had been repositioned, and, most tellingly, the absence of normal sounds from a building that should have contained a frightened family. Elena's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. The safe house had been breached. Her approach to the building was agonizingly slow and methodical, checking for booby traps and ambush positions while fighting against the urge to rush toward whatever had happened to Volkov and his grandchildren. Elena had seen too many operations fail because operators allowed emotional concerns to override tactical discipline. The rear entrance showed signs of forced entry, locks that had been picked or bypassed, security sensors that had been disabled, and scuff marks that suggested multiple personnel had entered the building. Elena drew her pistol and prepared for close-quarters combat in an environment where innocent civilians might be present. The interior of the safe house was eerily quiet, with none of the background noise that would normally accompany a building occupied by adults and children. Elena moved through the hallways with professional caution, checking corners and potential ambush sites while listening for any sounds that might indicate where the occupants had gone. She found them in the reinforced center room that Agent Chen had designated as the final fallback position. Marcus Volkov was seated in a chair with his hands zip-tied behind his back, while his two grandchildren, a boy of perhaps 8 and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6, were huddled together on a couch under the watchful eyes of 3 armed operatives. Elena's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the lead operative as someone from her own past. Colonel David Harrison had been her commanding officer during the Afghanistan deployment, the man who had ordered her to take the shot that killed an innocent schoolteacher. Harrison's presence confirmed that her current situation was connected to the events that had destroyed her military career and cost her parents their lives. "Hello, Elena," Harrison said without turning around, his voice carrying the same patronizing tone that had infuriated her 12 years earlier. "We've been waiting for you. Please join us. I believe we have several matters to discuss." Elena kept her pistol trained on Harrison while assessing the tactical situation. 3 enemy operators, 2 civilian children, and 1 elderly man in a confined space with limited cover. Any gunfight would almost certainly result in innocent casualties, which Elena suspected was exactly why Harrison had arranged the confrontation in this manner. "Let the children go," Elena said simply. "They're not part of this." Harrison finally turned to face her, and Elena was shocked by how much he had aged since their last meeting. The colonel's hair had gone completely gray, deep lines etched his face, and his eyes carried the hollow look of someone who had made too many moral compromises for too many years. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Harrison replied. "These children have seen too much, heard too much, and their grandfather has information that threatens operations extending far beyond your understanding. All of them represent unacceptable security risks." Elena felt rage building in her chest, the same fury that had driven her to question orders in Afghanistan and ultimately led to her exile from the military. "These are innocent children, David. Whatever Volkov has done, whatever information he possesses, killing children is not an acceptable solution." "Acceptable?" Harrison's laugh was bitter and devoid of humor. "Elena, you have no idea what's at stake here. The operations that Volkov threatens to expose have prevented more terrorist attacks than you could count. The weapons sales he wants to testify about have provided intelligence that has saved thousands of American lives." Elena stared at her former commanding officer, trying to reconcile the man she had once respected with the person who was now threatening to murder children. "You're selling weapons to terrorists, David. How do you justify that as protecting American lives?" "Because it works." Harrison's composure cracked slightly, revealing the desperation beneath his professional demeanor. "We sell them technology that we can track and counter. We provide weapons that we can disable remotely. We create dependencies that allow us to control their operations and predict their targets." The explanation was both logical and monstrous, representing the kind of strategic thinking that treated human lives as acceptable losses in larger geopolitical calculations. Elena realized that Harrison genuinely believed he was serving American interests, even as he prepared to execute innocent children to protect operations that violated every principle the military claimed to defend. "And when the systems fail," Elena asked, "when the remote disables don't work, or the tracking is compromised, or they reverse engineer the technology and improve it, How many Americans die because you decided to arm our enemies? Harrison's silence answered her question more clearly than words. Elena understood that she was looking at a man who had become so focused on tactical advantages that he had lost sight of strategic consequences. The weapons trafficking operations had undoubtedly provided short-term intelligence benefits, but they had also ensured that America's enemies possessed increasingly sophisticated capabilities. The children don't leave this room alive, Harrison said finally. That decision has been made at levels far above both of us. You can surrender now and receive consideration for your cooperation, or you can resist and watch them die regardless. Elena looked at the two children huddled together on the couch, their eyes wide with fear but showing remarkable composure given their circumstances. The boy had positioned himself slightly in front of his younger sister, trying to protect her despite his own terror. Their grandmother had been murdered, their grandfather was about to be executed, and now strangers were debating whether they deserved to live. Elena made her decision with the clarity that came from finally understanding what she was fighting for. Not for country, not for ideology, not for money or revenge, but for the simple principle that innocent children deserved protection from adults who had forgotten the difference between right and wrong. David, she said quietly, you're going to let these children walk out of here, or I'm going to kill everyone in this room except them. Harrison's response was to signal his operatives, who began raising their weapons toward the children. Elena's training took over, her body moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. The gunfight lasted less than 10 seconds and was decided by factors that had nothing to do with training or equipment. Elena's motivation was absolute. She would die before allowing harm to come to innocent children. Harrison's operatives were following orders, but lacked the desperate certainty that made Elena's actions unstoppable. When the shooting stopped, Elena was the only person left standing. Harrison and his operatives were dead, their blood staining the safe house's concrete floor. Volkov was wounded but alive, having been struck by a ricochet that had missed his vital organs. The children were physically unharmed, but traumatized by violence that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Elena holstered her pistol and began checking on the casualties, starting with Volkov's wound and then turning her attention to the children who were now sobbing with the delayed reaction that followed extreme terror. She knelt beside them and spoke in the gentle tone that seemed impossibly different from the voice that had just threatened to kill everyone in the room. "It's over," she said softly. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you." But even as Elena comforted the children, she knew that their ordeal was far from finished. Harrison had been part of a larger organization that wouldn't simply accept the loss of a key operative and valuable witness. More resources would be deployed, additional assets would be brought to bear, and the killing would continue until either Elena and her charges were dead or the conspiracy itself was exposed and destroyed. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message that confirmed her assessment. Harrison's team has gone dark, deploying additional resources. All personnel are now expendable. Complete the mission at any cost. Elena deleted the message and began preparing for immediate evacuation. The safe house was no longer secure, the local area was compromised, and she had perhaps minutes before additional enemy forces arrived. Volkov needed medical attention, the children required psychological support, and Elena had to somehow keep all of them alive long enough to expose the conspiracy that had already cost so many lives. As she helped Volkov to his feet and gathered the traumatized children, Elena realized that her war against the shadow government had entered a new phase. She was no longer just fighting to complete or refuse a contract. She was fighting to protect innocent lives and expose a conspiracy that threatened the foundations of American democracy. The battle for truth was about to begin. The Elena Sullivan Chronicles is an epic tale spanning over a century, chronicling the transformation of a skilled military sniper into one of America's most important defenders of democratic accountability. This gripping narrative explores themes of redemption, moral awakening, and the power of individual courage to combat institutional corruption. The story opens at a Marine Corps training facility in Quantico, Nevada, where Elena Sullivan, a civilian contractor with a mysterious background, approaches a Barrett M82 sniper rifle for what appears to be a routine marksmanship demonstration. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen watches nervously as this unknown woman examines the legendary weapon, unaware that he's about to witness an impossible shot that will become part of military folklore. Play. Elena's target lies 847 meters away, nearly 3 kilometers across the Nevada desert. The environmental conditions are brutal. Shifting winds, heat distortion, and atmospheric variables that would challenge even the most experienced military snipers. What happens next defies all conventional understanding of marksmanship physics and human capability. With methodical precision, Elena makes microscopic adjustments to the rifle's scope, calculating variables that seem impossible for any human to process simultaneously. When she fires, the bullet travels for what feels like an eternity before striking the target with perfect accuracy. The shot is so extraordinary that it immediately raises questions about Elena's true identity and background. This opening sequence establishes Elena as someone with capabilities that extend far beyond normal human limitations, setting the stage for revelations about her dark past and eventual transformation into a force for justice. Through carefully revealed flashbacks, we learn that Elena Sullivan's journey began as an idealistic young soldier who enlisted in the Marines with dreams of serving her country honorably. Her exceptional marksmanship skills quickly earned recognition, leading to deployment in Afghanistan, where she served as a military sniper during the height of the War on Terror. Elena's military service was distinguished but ultimately disillusioning. She witnessed the deaths of comrades who had been killed by weapons that, unknown to them, had been provided to their enemies through illegal arms trafficking networks involving American officials. The realization that her government was complicit in the deaths of her fellow soldiers created a profound moral crisis that would shape the rest of her life. After leaving the military, Elena's skills attracted the attention of private contractors and intelligence agencies that operated in the gray areas between legal and illegal activities. Her precision shooting abilities and tactical training made her valuable to organizations that needed problems eliminated permanently and quietly. For 12 years, Elena worked as a government assassin, taking contracts that eliminated threats to national security, or at least, what her handlers claimed were threats to national security. Her targets included arms dealers, foreign agents, terrorist operatives, and occasionally, American citizens who had become inconvenient to powerful interests. This period of Elena's life represents the moral nadir of her journey. She had become exactly the kind of person she had once sworn to protect others from, someone who used violence to serve the interests of those in power, regardless of whether those interests aligned with justice or democratic principles. Elena's transformation begins when she receives what appears to be a routine assassination contract targeting Marcus Volkov, a Russian arms dealer who has been cooperating with the FBI to expose weapons trafficking networks. The contract comes with unusual specifications. Elena must eliminate not only Volkov, but also his 2 young grandchildren, who are being used as leverage to ensure his cooperation. This requirement crosses a moral line that Elena didn't realize still existed within her conscience. Despite 12 years of government-sanctioned killing, she finds herself unable to contemplate the murder of innocent children who have become pawns in a larger conspiracy they cannot understand. Elena's decision to protect rather than eliminate her targets marks the beginning of her redemption arc. Instead of carrying out the assassination, she chooses to investigate why powerful forces are so desperate to prevent Volkov's testimony that they're willing to murder children to silence him. Her investigation reveals a conspiracy that extends throughout the American defense establishment, involving Pentagon officials, State Department administrators, intelligence agencies, and defense contractors who have been facilitating illegal weapons sales to terrorist organizations and America's enemies. The weapons trafficking isn't random criminal activity. It's a systematic operation designed to arm America's opponents while simultaneously profiting from the conflicts that result. As Elena digs deeper into the conspiracy, she discovers that Agent Sarah Chen, Volkov's FBI handler, has been murdered to prevent her from protecting her witness. The arms dealer and his grandchildren are being held in a supposedly secure safe house that has been compromised from within the federal system itself. The conspiracy involves Colonel David Harrison, a military officer who has been coordinating weapons sales through official channels while eliminating anyone who threatens to expose the operation. Harrison's network includes federal agents, intelligence operatives, and defense contractors who view American democracy as a business opportunity rather than something worth protecting. Elena realizes that normal law enforcement channels are compromised and that protecting Volkov and his grandchildren will require her to fight against the very system she once served. Her military training and assassination skills, previously used to eliminate threats to corrupt officials, must now be deployed to protect innocent people from those same officials. The safe house assault that follows demonstrates Elena's tactical brilliance and moral transformation. Instead of using her skills to commit murder, she deploys them to save lives, turning her expertise in violence into a tool for protecting democracy rather than undermining it. Elena's decision to protect Volkov triggers a cross-country chase involving multiple intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and professional killers who understand that the arms dealer's testimony could expose decades of illegal activities. The conspiracy's resources include satellite surveillance, military-grade weapons, and operatives positioned throughout the government and transportation systems. Elena must transport a wounded witness and traumatized children from Las Vegas to Washington, D.C., while evading pursuit by professionals with unlimited resources and official authorization to eliminate their targets. The journey requires careful planning, specialized equipment, and assistance from networks of patriots who have become disillusioned with official corruption. During this phase of the story, Elena encounters the Guardians, an informal network of former military personnel, intelligence analysts, and federal agents, who have decided that protecting American democracy is more important than following orders from superiors who have forgotten their oath to serve the public interest. The Guardians represent something Elena had lost faith in during her years as an assassin: the possibility that good people within the system could work together to combat corruption and protect innocent lives. Their existence gives her hope that redemption is possible not just for individuals but for institutions that have been corrupted by self-serving officials. The climax of Elena's redemption arc occurs when she successfully delivers Marcus Volkov to Congress, where he provides explosive testimony about weapons trafficking and government corruption before the Senate Intelligence Committee. The hearing is broadcast live, making it impossible for the conspiracy to suppress Volkov's revelations through conventional means. Senator Patricia Morrison, a former prosecutor with a reputation for investigating government corruption, conducts the hearing with skill and determination that ensures Volkov's testimony receives the attention it deserves. The arms dealer's revelations about systematic collaboration between American officials and international weapons dealers shock even experienced senators who thought they understood the scope of government misconduct. Volkov's testimony exposes how American military personnel were killed with weapons that their own government had helped provide to their enemies, revealing a level of betrayal that extends beyond simple corruption into treason against the principles that make American democracy worth defending. The hearing represents Elena's complete moral transformation from someone who enabled government corruption through violence to someone who exposed that corruption by protecting those brave enough to speak truth to power. The Volkov testimony triggers investigations, prosecutions, and reforms that reshape American foreign policy and defense spending. 17 officials are indicted, including Pentagon administrators, State Department officials, and defense contractors, who had made hundreds of millions of dollars facilitating illegal weapons sales. Elena's role in protecting Volkov and exposing the conspiracy earns her official recognition from Congress and, more importantly, a sense of peace that had eluded her for 12 years. She establishes a security consulting firm that specializes in protecting whistleblowers and supporting people who report government misconduct. The Sullivan Foundation grows into a major force for government accountability, providing security, legal support, and counseling services for people who risk their careers and safety to expose institutional corruption. Elena's work attracts other disillusioned professionals who want to use their skills to protect democracy rather than undermine it. The narrative follows Elena's work over several decades as she protects dozens of whistleblowers and supports congressional investigations that expose various forms of government misconduct. Each case involves people who have discovered illegal activities within their own organizations and need protection while deciding whether to report them through official channels. Elena's clients include military personnel who have uncovered weapons trafficking, intelligence analysts who have exposed illegal surveillance programs, defense contractors who have discovered fraud in military procurement, and federal agents who have witnessed systematic violations of constitutional rights. The story demonstrates how individual courage can trigger systemic change when institutions fail to police themselves, while also showing the personal costs faced by people who choose principle over personal safety. As the narrative progresses through several decades, it shows how corruption evolves with technology while maintaining the same fundamental characteristics: officials using government resources to eliminate threats to their power, rather than serving the public interest. Elena's later cases involve artificial intelligence systems being used to target American citizens for surveillance and potential elimination, demonstrating that each generation faces new forms of institutional overreach that require constant vigilance from people willing to risk their safety to protect democratic principles. The story suggests that Elena's work is never truly finished, because corruption and abuse of power are constant threats that require ongoing resistance from individuals who understand that democracy requires active maintenance rather than passive acceptance. The narrative concludes by showing Elena's long-term impact on American democracy through the Sullivan Foundation, the Elena Sullivan Institute for Democratic Accountability, and various reforms triggered by the witnesses she protected throughout her career. Her transformation from assassin to protector became a case study in moral development and civic responsibility, taught in political science classrooms, and used as inspiration for new generations of government accountability advocates. The story suggests that Elena's most important legacy isn't the specific corruption she exposed, but the example she set of how individuals can choose redemption over resignation, using their skills and experience to protect others rather than serving their own interests. The narrative ends where it began, with another mysterious woman approaching the Barrett M82 at Quantico, suggesting that courage and precision are qualities that manifest in each generation through people willing to take the shots that others consider impossible. This circular structure implies that Elena's story is part of a larger pattern of individuals who discover their true calling through service to principles larger than themselves, transforming their skills from tools of destruction into instruments of protection and justice.